Live. All right, guys, welcome to Uncivilized Unplugged. As we like to say around here, the #1 live podcast in the entire universe. My name is Trevor Boehm. I'm the host and the founder of the Uncivilized Men's Movement and the author of Michaela. Look what I got the first copy of.
Nice.
Man Uncivilized, the book, which I will get to in a second. So tonight is a big celebration. I have one of my absolute favorite humans coming on. We are going to address the fact that we are not related in a minute and how we figured that out. My mission is to change the way 1 million men express their masculinity by combining the primal and the divine. Michaela has been a huge influence and teacher in my life. For those of you who want to get your hands on a pre-sale copy, the book is live tomorrow. I just checked the sales page and it looks like someone vomited numbers and code all over it. So the only asterisk to that is if my guy in Pakistan pulls through tonight, it's available tomorrow. If not, I will let you all know when it is available. We also need to throw a quick shout out and thank you to Cured Nutrition for sponsoring the podcast. Best CBD on the market for both humans and canines. Now, let's rock and roll. For those of you who are new tonight, the idea of Unplugged is that you get access to a living room conversation. So two people who know each other who are just hanging out, chatting. We don't really have a script. We have some guidelines and some things that we're going to talk about, but this is really freestyle, and I wanted to give you access to high-level people and thought leaders and people who think outside the box. And so I will introduce our guest tonight in a second if you don't already know her, but I'd love to share the story of Michaela. The first time I met you, this was at a workshop in LA. And this was, I think you were teaching with Steve on Polarity, or it was masculine finance. It was one of the free ones in LA. And I remember going, I was about, a month into a marital separation. So things were not that awesome. But I thought, what an opportunity to perhaps learn some things about relationships, because perhaps what I knew about relationships in the past needed an upgrading. And about an hour and a half into this experience, I remember thinking, holy shit, this is like jujitsu. This is like Chinese medicine. It makes sense to me in a way I don't yet understand, and I'm now obsessed with it. And I went home. I actually called my ex-wife from the car. We were still speaking at the time. I said, I think I found what I want to study for the next 5 years. And bam. And I remember coming up after, for those of you here, let's clear up the lineage. And I thought that Boehm was a really unique name. And I thought, oh my God, finally, like my relatives, like I hope they're not listening to this, like none of them are really cool. And so I was super duper excited to finally have a cool relative. And I was like, Michaela, my name is Trevor Boehm. And you said, you're like, this is essentially like having Smith or Jones as a last name. Well done. And yeah, I was walking away a little deflated, but the information that came across in that workshop was life-changing and has been life-changing. So before I gush any more about you, and we could spend hours going through your bio and all the accomplishments and the who's who that you work with, and your book, The Wild Woman's Way, which guys on the call read this book. Ladies on the call read it 4 or 5 times. Everybody get a copy of it. Michaela, in your own words, who are you? What are you birthing into this world? What are you building? What are you about? And also, is there something that you can share with us that most people don't know?
Well, most people don't know that we are in fact related. somewhere.
My twin sister. Yeah. Exactly.
We should both do a DNA test and see if something shows up.
If it I swear to God, I'm telling you, I can tell. The accent, the hair, the shoulder. It's got to happen.
We're second.
He's in a pod. Yeah.
Yes. But all joking aside, I would consider myself a teacher and author and expert and whatever you want to call yourself, right? I mean, there's so many titles um, in the realm of relationship and sexuality. And where I mostly live and work is the intersection of embodiment and relationship and sexuality. Because of course, you can think your way into good sex, but really you can't, meaning you have to actually do it. You have to actually involve your body in your relationship and in your sexual engagement. And sexual engagement is not necessarily intercourse. I mean, the play and the enjoyment and the flirting and the friction and the attraction that comes with being attracted to somebody. And the body is a very, very important aspect of that, because if you're not involving the body, it's your head meeting another head, and all the good stuff that happens down here, both in the sense that that's where the pleasure sits, the power sits, the intuition sits, but also the boundary setting sits, are not as available when there isn't good embodiment. So, without going too far into my bio, I've spent over 40,000 hours one-on-one counseling with people. I've taught workshops for the last now 18 years. I've been at this for 34 years total. I started when I was 16, so that gives you an idea. And I combine essentially a very classic psychological training. I have a degree in Jungian psychology. I also have a very, very extensive education in the realms of trauma therapy. And I have a tantric background because my first teacher was a female tantrika. And and that lineage nowadays. So, it's a wild bag of different things, and I use them to optimize people's relationships. And what that means is, and this is very important to me, particularly nowadays, it's not one size fits all. There's no 10 tips for the perfect relationship. It's really, really important to get people connected to themselves so that they then can choose the style and the configuration of relationship that they want. It doesn't matter if it's gay or straight or 3 people or 5 people, or I object to chickens being involved, but aside from that, I'm essentially cool with whatever. Just don't harm any animals. So,
this is where I'm glad, just dive right in. So far we've covered you're a badass and no chickens. Okay, carry on.
No chickens. No animals whatsoever. Do not involve animals in your relationship whatsoever, in your sexual relationship particularly.
I second that.
Yes. What's one thing people don't know about me? Oh God, there's many, because I'm intensely private.
Yeah.
But here's a very, very bizarre tidbit that I don't know where it's coming from. I can match any paint color by vision from going from a room into the store. I have perfect visual recall on colors. I don't know why. It's some very bizarre thing. But you can hand me, you can say this, and I can go into a Home Depot and pick you the card off the rack.
Thank you for sharing that. You are insanely fucking useful. I would love to just have you around at all times. Like, I don't know. Let's ask Michaela. Oh, you painting the house? We can ask Michaela. Oh, your relationships network? We can ask Michaela. I love it.
Quite useful in that domain. And
yeah. Michaela, what would you say if our goal was to take the idea of sex and take it from this narrow scope of friction, not even just genital friction, but mostly friction, and in the US expand it out? How do we start that conversation or extend that conversation or get that to people who just went, wait a minute, you just said sex, but not talking about sex? How do we start that?
Poof. Um, well, I mean, here's the thing to kind of feel. Essentially, most of what we do is based on sex, right? And what I mean by that is the erotic play, the divine erotic play, however you want to say that, right? You can say that in more woo-woo or less woo-woo ways. But most things revolve around us wanting to combine ourselves with somebody else. And we live our lives referenced to that particular endeavor, right? In some way or another, in the way we look, in the way we dress, in the way we choose friends, drive cars, whatever, right? So there is that. We are always engaged in the play of the erotic, meaning the polarity between us and something else. And us and something else could be us and a beautiful sunset. There's a certain kind of divine erotic play there. And it can be us and another human, depending on whom you're attracted to, another man, another woman. And within that, there is so much more than sex, of course, right? There is the play of the opposites. And the important piece in my work is the kind of education I can give people to make them understand that it's the play of opposites. Not the play of sames. And relationship is based on sameness, right? The more we have in common, the better we'll get along. See, we're off to a good start because we have the same last name. so right there, we have a commonality. And then we can, maybe let's just say I discovered that you have a love for orange soda and I have a love for orange soda. And, yes, well, I'm on water, but so those commonalities are what builds our relationship and what builds rapport and what builds the kind of resonance that makes people actually get along well. The unfortunate aspect is that the better we get along, less exciting our sex life will be. That's just the way it goes, because sameness creates more and more, togetherness, and oppositeness needs the pulling apart. And so the classic scenarios, people get to know each other, they have amazing sex, it's great, they don't know each other, then you talk all the time, you spend all your time together, finding out what you have in common. You both discover you have an obscure love of 16th century poetry or something, and you like blowfish, right? and there you go. And then now you date, and then you move in together. Now you have common friends, then you have common interests, you go places together, and one fine day, you find you next to each other on the sofa, you're wearing your matching sweatpants, you're watching whatever it is, Game of Thrones or Vikings or whatever, you're holding hands, it's super nice, but no one wants to fuck, to say it very right. And that's the moment people think their relationship is bad. Actually, their relationship is fine, because relationally speaking, they're pulling on the same string. They are resonating. They are the same. Everything's good. So for instance, relationship issues would be you can't communicate, you don't agree on religion, food, the upbringing of your children, whom to vote for, right? Those are relationship issues. And if you can't fix that, you have irreconcilable differences, and then you divorce. Not being interested in having hot sex anymore, but nicely cuddling on the sofa is not a relationship issue. It's a polarity issue. And so within that, there is a lot of play that can happen when you understand the play of opposites. So the play of opposites, as I said, could also be with nature. You can go into the surf and really feel that polarity of you and the surf, or you and the thunderstorm. And you can feel that with a human. It doesn't matter if they're same sex or opposite sex, that these principles apply in general. And when you feel that polarity, it creates that friction, the good friction. So that's one aspect. The other aspect when you talk about how can we open it up, is that how you feel another is through your own body. Right? So when I look at you, how I feel you is things in my body register. Right? And if I'm sensitive to my body, I can register things in your body. I can visually ascertain certain things. Like if you cry, I know you're probably sad, right? But or if you smile, you're probably happy. But everything else is somewhat felt through the body. And so in order to be effective in being with another human and feeling another human, you have to essentially be able to connect and feel your own body and be intimate with the self, right? And I know you talk a lot about this, and it's super, super important, sensitizing to the sensations of your own body. And with that, you can then hear the messages of your body, of your emotion, of your thoughts, because you're not drowning it all out and numbing it all out. And then from that place, you can make a better choice whom you actually want to polarize with and whom you want to play with and how you want to be out there in the world as a sexual being, right? Because there's a huge responsibility with being a thing, both men and women alike. Because if you just walk around splashing your sexuality and your preferences all over the place, best case scenario, you look like an idiot. Worst case scenario, you get attacked or locked up.
Yeah.
Right? So you gotta have some sensitivity to your own body. That's where I'm gonna stop for a moment.
That was exquisite. Thank you. Do you think it's harder for people is it harder today to have a sense of our bodies and a sense of other people? And I'll dovetail that question with, do you think it's harder today to be in and stay in relationship? Or is that just like it's really hard to find a great guy in New York? Well, what do you know? Everybody in LA says it's really hard to find a great guy in LA. Is that just kind of common conversation? Or do you think from your experience that it actually is more challenging to be in our bodies today and be in relationship today?
Yeah, I think there are two issues, right? So I think when we look at embodiment, right? Embodiment to me is nothing else but you're always in your body, of course, till the moment you die, right? Or if you astral project or something like that. But
Wednesdays. Yeah.
but otherwise, always in your body. But how much of the messages of your body can you hear depends on how sensitive you are or how loud the outside world is, right? The outside noise is. So if you and I are going to an Aerosmith concert, and we're standing next to each other, or some heavy metal or something, right? We're standing next to each other, front row. You're going to have to scream really, really loud for me to hear anything. But then if we have one of those Matrix style kind of situations where suddenly everything disappeared and we're in a library, right? You remember that when that thing is with they're loading the program and then they're bringing the weapons in. So it's like they're taking the concert out and suddenly it's just you and I in an empty room.
Right.
You're going to sound insane. Right. Because you're so loud, right? Screaming at me. And so that's the metaphor for what happens in the body. Your body speaks. And when there's too much loud happening, and loud can be environmental overwhelm, mental chatter, your kind of emotional turmoil, the dance of your day, your email, your phone, your whatever, right? So all of that is noise. And in there somewhere, the body says the things the body says, but you can't hear it. And so embodiment is really being able to listen and be with the messages of the body. And so there's various ways you can do that. One is reducing stimuli. The other one is relaxing the body. And the other one is sensitizing to the sensations in your body. Those are three of the main things I work with. So that all said, is it harder to be in our bodies than ever? Yes, absolutely, because our bodies are essentially built to move all the time, right? That's how we lived for millions of years. Being was movement, movement, movement. You walked, you gathered, you hunted, you rested in between, but you were always active. And now we're parked in a chair. You know, if you work somewhere, you're parked in a chair for 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you drive home and then you sit in front of the TV if you're a normal functioning, you know, like functioning in the normal sense of the word human being.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll go to the gym for half an hour or an hour, right? And if you're really, really good, maybe you run in the morning. But when you look at the ratio of active movement in the body versus parking the body in order to work with the head, you get the idea of how the energy in our systems goes up. And that's why we have the tight shoulders, neck, jaw, the headaches, the tension here, all the things people report has to do with the fact that the energy never goes down. And then mind you, then suddenly you want to be aroused and fully in your body. And it's easier for men than for women because of how men's systems are built. But for a woman to go from essentially not having felt her body all day to having an orgasm is a long fucking way to go, right? And so, you know, sometimes that's just not worth the effort at that point.
Right.
And so that said, being in our body is no longer the thing that we do on a regular basis. And even if we want to go in our body, some people think that embodiment means that they just make the body scream so loud that it drowns out the loudness of the, you know, of the environment. So you do some massively um, activating exercise that makes the body have to scream, right? And then you go, oh, it feels good in my body. No, your body's just screaming so loud that it's louder than your environment. And somewhere behind all of that, your little L5 whispers, care for me, please, or whatever, your knees or your hips or your whatever.
Or your
right?
adrenal glands.
Or your adrenal glands. That's a whole other issue, right? So that's your question number one. Question number two, yeah, it's a lot harder to date or find somebody good. You know, I mean, for better or for worse, in the beginning, you know, I think people looked at online dating. I mean, I remember when people really started online dating, right? I had a counseling office. I saw people 8 hours, 9 hours a day, and people would come in and show me their dating profiles on OkCupid or something like that, or JDate or whatever. I don't even know if that still exists, right?
It still exists. I'm trying to get on it.
And I remember specifically once with a woman client going through the profiles, and it was like a candy store.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, well, I'll take that one and that one, and oh, this one's cute. But of course, it's not a candy store, and they're actual people, right? And they're not little Ken dolls that you collect, and they usually have very bad habits, and they're in for not exactly the same things that you might be in for. And so I think there's a huge disconnect with the online aspect of it, because you're not actually getting to feel the person. It's a very one-dimensional, you know, when you get really good and when you can really feel the way people write, you can get an idea or not, but not really. And often the people who are actually good quality people have the worst profiles because they're just not those kind of people. Right? Because there is, you know, people who are not spending their entire life honing their Tinder pictures, and they are not in the running, right? Even though they're probably the better people because they actually have a life, and their entire existence doesn't consist of, you know, taking the perfect butt shot for the Tinder profile, right? Which might take several days and enormous photoshopping, you know. I know people, they spend hours a day, you know, like. And then that's what you fall for, of course, right? And then you end up spend a few hours a day photographing their butt, you know. I mean, and then let's talk dick pics for a moment, right?
Please.
I mean,
It's a
when we
favorite
talk about
subject of mine.
online
Yeah.
dating, what the fuck happened, right? Yes, what
I
the
wrote a
fuck
whole
happened
article on it.
that yes, yes, but that's what we're dealing with. So why
Right.
do we not get good dating pools anymore? Well, there's another reason too, which is uh, it has divided the fact much wider, right? So except for the few years when you are younger as a woman, where we can swear on this
Oh,
podcast,
please,
right?
fuck
I've
boss
already
shit. Yeah, yeah, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was on a podcast yesterday. Everybody was Christian, and I couldn't even say hell. I had to say heck, which I really object to because I think that's wrong.
Michaela, you
Um,
have full
oh,
license to swear your fucking head off. Go for it. Like, and even if we weren't allowed, I'd be like, Michaela Boehm's coming on. She can do whatever she wants. Yeah, swear, swear, swear.
yeah, I get a bad reputation. But anyway, what I was going to say is, um, in your early 20s or so, you have a few years, even as a woman, where you should and can, and I qualify the should in a moment, where you do some sports fucking, right? Meaning you're not necessarily looking for a relationship. You can be on Tinder and you're not kidding anybody about wanting to find your husband, right?
Mhm.
And that's perfectly fine. But at some point, this divide builds where you have, you said New York, there's no good men in New York, right?
Mhm.
I just was in New York seeing clients and teaching a workshop. And you have men who have suddenly all the women of New York available as a dating pool for a roll in the hay,
Mhm.
right? Because why settle down with one when you can constantly access all,
Mhm.
right? And then you have women who actually just want one guy to have a good time with for the most part, right? And to date and to eventually maybe have a family with and things like that. So the gap has gotten really, really big between, it used to be, I mean, when I dated, this totally dates me, right? When I dated, there were not even cell phones. I remember specifically, I lived on the very, very top floor of a house in Vienna, and I would come home from university, so I'm in my early 20s, and I'd come in the front door, and I'd hear my phone ring on the 8th floor, walk up, right? And it would be like, yeah, I'm not going to make it up there. Make it up there. If he wants something, he'll call back, right? And eventually one had an answering machine, but that came way later. But it wasn't that big of a deal, right? And I mean, if you were really, really, really crazy about a guy, you had to essentially sequester yourself at home and stare at the phone for 3 days or so because you couldn't leave the freaking house, right? So, so that, but what that did is it actually gave you a live sense of a human, right? Because if you met a guy, right, when I lived in Vienna, the way people met was you knew which coffee house somebody went to. So
Mhm.
if you wanted to meet somebody or see somebody, you had common friends, so the person was somewhat qualified. You
Mhm.
knew he wasn't an axe murderer because he knew other people and he's probably dated other people in your circle. And then that person could find you and then you'd hang out and you'd get to meet each other. But then if the dude didn't call for 3 or 4 days and you were like stuck in your apartment starving, you know, then that gave you a real time information about who that guy was,
Mhm.
right? And then the next time he sauntered into your coffee house, you were probably not so excited, you know, and
Mhm.
and that there was some actual information there. Now, of course, with texts and everything, we miss all these signals, right? We miss all of that because it's all done via text. I don't know when I last picked up my phone and actually took a live phone call, right? I don't know about you. I don't talk to anybody on the phone if I can absolutely help it, right? So it's all text. It's super one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Um, Emojis, as fun as they are not a substitute for feeling who somebody is. And then when you actually meet somebody, um, it's not that easy to ascertain who are they unless you can triangulate through friends and stuff like that. So you are actually, you think you're further along when you meet somebody on a first date than you are, right? Because you've had, shallow phone contact with them, which could have gotten as far as phone sex and whatever, right? I mean, people do all kinds of stuff before they ever meet. And so then you meet a live person, and it's person to person, and you assume certain things based on the text exchange that your body hasn't caught up to at all. Right. So now I'm painting this horrible picture. And now there's, of course, also really good stuff, which is you can go through a vast, amount of people very quickly and see whom you really like, and you're not wasting as much time. And if you're really good and you can kind of really feel people, and, you can learn how to qualify certain things. But there's certainly a falling through the cracks of quality markers friendly, going further faster based on who you are and who that person is.
Do you have faith in dating moving forward? Is it, I try to say as an eternal optimist and tell people like, yes, but people still meet every day. People are still getting married. People are still having babies. People are still falling in love. But then I also hear from people all day, every day, I can't find someone. I don't want to, it's a mess out there.
Yeah, I do have faith in general. I think people will always meet and figure things out. But I also want to say that, I've talked about this fairly extensively recently for a number of reasons. People have suddenly started asking. But the fairy tale that we think is relationship has really not ever worked for anyone. Yeah, you can have like a good honeymoon period, and so you should, because you're going to have to hold on to that for what comes after, but 40,000 hours of seeing couples and seeing people, I can tell you. Now, of course, you could say, you don't go to the doctor unless you're sick, so maybe I only saw sick people. But in workshops, it's not actually sick people. It's people who want to improve their skill level. And for very few people, the conventional model of relationship works anymore. And when people would actually be honest, the things they say they want, they don't actually want. And this is particularly true with women often.
Can you give an example?
Well, I have a client, for instance. She's very, very beautiful and rather well known. And every time she meets a guy, right, when you're well known, it's also horrible because you never know why a guy is in for it, right? Every time she used to meet a guy, I should say that, he was assessed under the husband criteria. And then it wouldn't go so well, right? And then at some point, I think on aborted relationship number 3 with some unbelievably good guys, I went, why exactly do they have to be husband material? Right? Do you want to get married? No. Do you want to have children in the next 5? She was in her early 20s back then, right? Do you want to have children in the next 5 years? No. Do you want to live with a guy? Absolutely not. What's the most important thing in your life right now? Well, building my career. Okay. So why couldn't you just have a really good time with this guy who you really like and who really likes you, and assess down the road, right? So that's one fairy tale, one criteria that was actually not a fair criteria. And then on the other hand, of course, if you are in your, let's say, early 30s or mid 30s, and you do want a child, and you're dating the kind of guys that are really hot and fun to be around, but they are not only dating you. And, it's like this drama, and you're just hoping that he will, become the man that you want him to be, where you also, delusional in a certain way, which happens a lot. Women love dating potential, right? I mean, it's an incredibly interesting thing. Women go, I like this guy. When he cuts his hair, puts different clothes on, get a different job, has some different friends, and starts working out, he'll be perfect.
Oh
Right?
boy.
When
Yeah.
I'm done with him, he's gonna be amazing. Steve always says it's like getting a fixer-upper.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else wants it, but you're going to be able to paint the thing, and it's going to be great. And then, but of course, human beings are not fixer-uppers. And when a woman isn't into a guy the way he's right now, she's constantly subtly giving messages of disapproval. And that's no way to live for any man. And, the other way around, if you would say to a woman, I like you, I want to be with you, but you need a boob job, become a blonde and grow 5 inches.
Don't
Right?
do that,
She'll
guys.
kill you.
Yes.
Well, yeah, she'll kill you. But that's what women do all the time to men. And so it's there's a lot of fairy tale and false expectations that make it that people who could have perfectly good relationships are not having them, because they're not basing it on what is, but what they should be. And that's a big piece into it. So I do have faith that people will always find each other, but when you see how many marriages end in divorce and how many relationships end in utter disaster, I have to advise people strongly to consider what they really want and dig a little bit deeper before they dive in so deep. So
thank you. It's absolutely beautiful. Can we shift gears really quickly, and just for, I want to be cognizant of your time, but just to speak about, since so much of my audience is men or women who are going to write me and ask me questions about men. It feels like, and maybe I'm biased because I'm trying to do this, that there is a shift happening in the collective male experience or the collective masculinity experience. Do you see that from your experience in the last 20, 30 years of working with people? And if so, what do men need to do to break through this sort of stuckness that we seem to be involved in?
It's a big question, right? I mean, I think the fact, when I look at my father, for instance, right, who's an incredibly good man. My dad's, I mean, I can't say enough about my father, right? And my mother, but we're talking men, right? My father had a very, very clear brief to his life, which is get an education, have a career, and support his family, and raise my sister and I well, and love my mother well, right? It was pretty straightforward. And he did that superbly well, right? And it was in my parents' relationship very, very clear who did what. They were very cooperative and collaborative, but it was pretty clear. My dad had a brief, right? Now, my parents got married right around women's lib, right? And my mother, by all means, is a very strong, liberated woman, but she raised both of her children and stayed at home. So things were super clear. Nowadays, women can pretty much, we still have a way to go, but we can pretty much do everything men do. And some of it we can do better than men, for reasons that I'll describe in a second, right? And that's actually a detriment, because we get stuck with so much. But because we have these, when you look at biology, evolutionary biology, we have to be able to keep multiple levels of task and engagement open, because that's how you keep children alive, right? If you're in a cave and you have to keep food on the fire and keep your animals from getting into the fire and keep your kids from getting to the animals and keep everybody from falling off the back of the cave, and you're probably also painting the cave. I don't think for 1 second that men painted those caves, right? So you're doing all of that. So you're constantly multitasking. Now, when you're a man, very black and white. So you have to give me some license here. But when you're a man, you're out there and you're like, hunt deer, hunt deer, hunt deer, right? If you think of anything else but hunt deer, you're not going to bring deer home to your family. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, a lot of women are capable of tending to multiple domains in the business world. And that makes them better at certain things, right? But in addition to that, women also still create the babies in their bodies and feed them and birth them. So we didn't really exactly leave anything for men to call their domain. Mm-hmm. Right? With women in the military and so on and so on and so on. So there's really no domain anymore where men have a brief. And I think that's a real problem, right? And then, of course, when that happens, I mean, you're way more aware of this than I am probably, the suicide rate and the depression rate and all of that. And that comes from a being, right, a creature, a gender, however you want to say it, the mammal on the biological level, not having a job. Right? That not having a purpose. And you always hear the talk about purpose. And I'm always a bit like, with the purpose, because it's become such a dogmatic thing. But instead of saying having a purpose, which is a bit, whatever, right? Having a job, having something to fix, having somewhere to orient towards, having a North Pole, so to speak, or a North Star. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have a North Star, and by the way, women have North Stars too. And sometimes their men are their North Stars, and sometimes their careers are their North Stars. But men don't get to have that anymore, because a lot of the things that used to be the domain of men are now considered toxic or obsolete, or they have been taken, or they've been looked at funny. So there isn't a lot of places to go, and there isn't a lot of places to hide. And that's a real problem. And within all of that, right, then we can talk about divorces and children and alimonies and all of those horrible things. But what do men need to know? Well, I think when I look at the men that I work with, and I work with everything from super, super famous, highly potent, super rich men to some guy who walks off the street, all right? And the one thing that I would say is, if there's something men should know, is that they're way more sensitive that they're being given credit to. And most men I work with are so sensitive, and they're so in tune, and they're so emotional. And just because they don't express it the way women express it, it's not seen. And the people who do express it then are looked at as wimpy. And the people who don't express it are considered toxic masculine. And it's a real, it's real catch-22, a real mindfuck in a certain way. When you're told you're not, that you actually are. And so the owning of one's sensitivity, and the owning of one's emotions, and the owning of one's intuition, and because of course, men need intuition and sensitivity and feeling as much as women. For one, you couldn't hunt if you're not intuitive. Anybody who fishes can tell you that the fisherman sense where the fish are underwater, and things like that. There's no difference there. In human beings are built to survive, and as part of the survival aspect, human bodies are highly sensitized to their environment. And to let anybody tell a guy otherwise, it's not good, because it's very important. That is a capital that's a human capital that's been untapped so far.
Thank you for saying that. I think what you're doing by speaking that as an expert is giving men permission. And I think that's one of the spaces that's one of the pathways into this new evolutionary space or consciousness space, whatever we're going to call it, is we as men have to give each other permission. And we have to hear from women that we have permission, and hear from experts and people in leading positions such as yourself to say, yes, she's right. It's okay. So guys, now hear that you have permission. Michaela, one of my favorite sentiments of yours, and there's a million of them, but around relationship that you've talked about, is the underservedness of generosity. Would you mind speaking a bit to that and framing it around how does one give generously without being codependent about it or just giving themselves into a hole? How do you balance that as kind of the last thought?
Well, it comes back down to knowing who you are so that you don't lose yourself in the process. Knowing who you are, how much you can feel yourself, how much you are in your body. But aside from that, right, the non-mark of longevity of relationship is generosity. There's research done on this now. And it's funny, I said this the other day in an interview in England, and the woman said, what, gifts? Expensive gifts? No, no. Like I saw like this Tiffany box, you know, like holographically appear between her and me. It had like this total thing to it.
Yes, stuff. Yeah.
And so that's not what I mean. What I mean is, and here's how you make sure. Here is how you can make sure that you're not a martyr. It's generosity of the heart. Right? That's different than generous for the sake of getting something, because that's transactional generosity. And it's different than being a martyr, where you are essentially leaving yourself behind in order to do something for somebody so that they love you. But generosity of the heart is when you feel your heart and you feel the other's heart, could be your partner or somebody else, and you feel what you could give to that heart so that that heart is happier and more open. And then from that place, you're not going to martyr yourself. And it's simple things. It's essentially walking by your partner who is sitting at their desk and going to the kitchen to get yourself a glass of water and bringing them one, right? Because you can feel that the act of putting that glass down would give that person the feeling of openness or enjoyment or love. Or maybe they don't even notice it till way later, and then they're like, whoa, where did this water come from? Oh, she thought of me, right? Or something like that. It's doing that one little extra thing that allows the other person to feel like they're regarded or considered. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect, and this I think is a very, very important aspect, is that praise is something people don't do. People have no problem with complaint whatsoever, right? But praise is something that costs nothing, and you're not martyring yourself. There's no martyring in praise. If I say to you, thanks for taking the trash out, I haven't paid for anything, right? I haven't compromised myself. Now, the reason some people don't do that is because they don't want the other person to feel like they can get comfortable. But that's really fucked up, really, right? It is really fucked up because, anybody who's ever had a dog knows that there's nothing better than positive reinforcement. And human beings are no different. It's like when you do something and somebody goes, oh, wow, thank you, this is really nice, you will do it again. And so practicing generosity, I think, is the number one tool for becoming a more attractive and and better serving human, right? Because you can.
Yeah. Perfect.
Not
Thank
because
you.
you have to, but because you can.
Yeah.
So,
Hear that, everybody. Please. Thank you. On that note, I think I've asked you this question. I ask this at the end of every conversation. If one of my elite listeners, and this is the cream of the crop of humanity here, if there's some way that someone can help you, bring you something, and I'm not shiny Tiffany stuff, but connect you with someone, or is there an organization that you support? How can we give back just a tiny bit, given all that you give to the world and all that you give to people? And be selfish.
well, as you well know, right, and anybody who's listened to the joke in the beginning, I have a huge soft spot for animals, particularly for dogs, right? And I have lots of rescue dogs, and I support an organization called Rescue from the Heart, and Heart is spelled H-A-R-T because her name is Annie Hart, H-A-R-T. So Rescue from the Heart. So if you want to spend the cost of one coffee, on some really, really, really dire need rescued dogs, one of which will probably end up at my house eventually again. I have 6 at the moment, so I'm beyond capacity. But that is something that I would, or any other dog rescue organization, but that's a very good one. That's always something that I encourage people to do, because one of the things that I've learned in being in LA and doing things is that I don't know how to say that. This will sound really weird. Dogs are saints, right?
Mm.
Dogs are saints in the sense that it doesn't matter what you do, they will love you. And when you look into a dog's eye, you're looking into God's eye, right? There's no other way of saying that, because they're so wide open. And particularly I think in the US particularly, it's not like that in Europe. Animals are just so neglected and abused and horribly treated at times. And so it's something that is very, very, very dear to me. And, I spend a lot of time and effort and my personal money on donating. I do other things for people too, but something about dog, right? That to me says wide open, available love to be given regardless, and that's very dear to me.
Thank you. And that's Rescue from the Heart, correct?
Rescue from the Heart, H-A-R-T. They're on Instagram, Facebook, they have a website, rescuefromtheheart.org, and the woman's name is Annie. And if you want to endlessly amuse her, put my name in the subject line.
Will do. Michaela, how do people get more of you? Where do you hang out? Where are you? Can you tell us your website, any workshops you have coming up? How do people get more Michaela?
Yes. Well, there's lots of ways to get Michaela. For one, I teach almost 60 events a year. So, on 3 continents. So I teach in Europe, in the UK, the US, mostly in Ojai these days, in California, but also other places, and in Australia. I'm assuming you'll post my website, so michaelaboehm.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an enormous amount of free recordings on the website under Listen. I'm also on iTunes and SoundCloud. It's just the Michaela Boehm podcast. And that's all Q&As from live workshops where I'm answering people's relationship questions, sex questions. In the last podcast, which I published yesterday, I talk about sex magic and bad boys. So
beautiful.
Lots and lots and lots of that. Instagram, mickboehm77. That gets you dog pictures. Mostly, and some other stuff.
Some pictures of Steve. Yeah.
Lots of pictures of Steve, who is an honorary dog, which means a lot.
Absolutely.
And my dogs are like this, right? And the dogs think he's one of them and love them. And when Steve is at my place, which he's, whenever we're in the States, all the dogs sleep in bed with Steve.
All of them.
All of them. This is very good because my bed is empty, and I'm like, oh yeah, and Steve like this, because they press in, of course, because they love that. But yeah, that's how you can find me. And as far as hanging out, Ojai is the place where I hang out when I'm around.
Oh, did we lose her? We can't lose you, Michaela. I think she's gonna come back. I gotta believe she's gonna come back, you guys. So before she comes back, or if we don't get her, I'm hoping she comes back in just so I can say thank you. Thank you guys for coming on. If you're interested in getting my book, go to manuncivilized.com/the book, and hopefully it will be available tomorrow. I'm going to throw this up on iTunes. The recording will be on YouTube. I'm going to try to think of some shit to talk about for just another minute or two to see if Michaela actually comes back on so that we can hopefully she chimes back in. We can give her a proper thank you. Isn't she amazing? She is absolutely, absolutely amazing. And please do go. Oh, she's back. She's back.
I'm back. I don't know what the hell happened. My computer died.
It's all good. I was just singing your praises.
So I'm on my phone now, and I don't know how to get video, but I am here.
Okay.
And I also wanted to say, I missed whatever the hell you were saying, but I just want to say to everybody on the call, I have seen Trevor's prototype of a book, and it rocks.
Thank you.
So if you haven't thought about getting it, get it. It's visually amazing. It's got amazing content, and congratulations. And I know what it takes to write a book. It's not an easy thing to do. So I hope tomorrow everything goes well and you get to enjoy book publishing day.
Thank you, Michaela. And thank you not just for coming on here and so graciously and generously giving your time, but thank you for the teaching that you're putting out in the world. I found it at a time when I was going through something really, really challenging, and it was such a life raft and such a life preserver to just sit and listen to you and believe, okay, there is a different way of being in a relationship. There is a way to use this pain. And you have shifted and are the foundation behind so much of what is in this book, and I'm teaching too. So most personally, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me on. And thanks to everybody who listened. And I'm now going to get on my merry way.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michaela. All right, you guys, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Please, when this does come on iTunes, please go and find us. We are Uncivilized Unplugged. Feel free to give her a 5-star rating. Feel free to share this. And thank you just for giving your time and for giving a shit. Now, go fucking be uncivilized. I love you guys. Mwah. Bye.